Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Pits, the Motorcast. This is your host, Dave. I got on line special guest, Courtney Mageau, the Aka funny car driver from Canada. How you doing, Courtney?
Hey, Dave. I'm doing great. How's everyone out there today? Hopefully having a good night.
And the funny car is the girl trouble, right?
Yeah, Girl Trouble Racing. That's the one.
And you've been around drag racing since you were 13 years old?
Well, technically, I've been around drag racing since I was in diapers. My grandpa was a drag racer, Dad was a drag racer, and I grew up at the track. So I was half the time I'd watch the races, and half the time I'd play in the park, and I didn't start driving juniors until I was about 13.
So how long did you drive junior drag races for?
I think that I raced them for 3 seasons, the year that I was 13, 14, and 15. And then I have a winter birthday, so we sold the car at the end of my 15th season, thinking that when I turned 16, I would get into a bracket car. But the timeline didn't play out perfectly, and I ended up spending 2 years without a seat, and got back into it bracket racing when I turned 18.
So how long did you do bracket racing for, Courtney?
Well, I guess I did with the juniors for 3 years, and then I had a bracket dragster that I drove in the Super Pro class. I had that for 6 seasons, and now I've been doing the alcohol funny car. I guess it's been, maybe 4 years. I guess this will probably be my 5th year coming up already. The time flies by so fast.
So what year did you get your license for a funny car?
Oh my gosh, this is like trivia. I think I got my license in 2014 or 2015.
Now, who licensed you?
It was a mix of local drag racers here in Edmonton. So we put my car together. We spent an entire off-season building it. And one of my good friends, who's also a funny car driver, he was the first person to make the first pass down the race, because my dad didn't want my first time in a funny car to be in a brand new car that we just put together, but the car was too small, so he couldn't drive it. So he had to get one of my family friends. He got in the car and drove it for the very first time, and the very first day we put him in the car, we actually electrocuted him.
Wow.
We had one of something wired incorrectly, and as soon as he tried to flick the kill switch on the steering wheel, he electrocuted himself. And oh my God, I still laugh about that to this day. So, yeah, he was there when I got my license, and my dad signed off on my license, and a couple of the local drag racers here in Edmonton. As long as they had the same class or above, they were able to sign off on mine too.
So now, would you say your dad's your biggest inspiration to get into drag racing then?
Yeah, I mean, without my dad, I don't think that I ever would have been at the racetrack. I mean, it's popular here in Edmonton, but it's still a niche sport. So I don't think that I would have had the exposure or the ambition to get into it if I hadn't grown up at the racetrack. So without him, I just don't know that I would have even had the idea to get into racing. But of course, with his knowledge and that of my grandpa, they made it pretty easy for me. I mean, especially when I was in the juniors, I did the very basic, change the gas, check my oil pressure. I could unfasten a Zeus if I had to, but it wasn't really until I got into the funny cars that I started getting a lot more hands-on in terms of understanding the mechanics a little bit better and helping with the tuning and even just kind of like the very minor stuff as well.
So now, what do you think about your dad's idea to move you into Nitro and match race with him?
Well, I know that that's been his dream for a long time, and I would love to make him happy, but at the same time, have to be a little bit realistic. And part of my goals and my dreams is I really want to master the class that I'm in and take home some wins and maybe even take home a championship before I move up. Because to me, moving up to Nitro is a rite of passage as much as anything. It's kind of that combination of having the opportunity, but also having earned it. So I want to make sure that I've earned it before I do something like that.
Right. So now, can you tell us how the experience was for you the first time driving this funny car?
Well, it was different from a dragster, but I don't think it was as different as everybody made it seem. Like, I guess growing up in Canada, there was one other female funny car driver, Sherry Bodnerchuk, and she's based out of Saskatchewan. So I saw her race every once in a while, but I mean, as far as the local drag racers go, like, funny car racing in Edmonton is popular. Like, we would usually have anywhere from 8 to 24 cars in the class at any given time, and they were all men. And I think that, like, I would watch them go, and they were always kind of going squirrely, or they do these massive burnouts and, kind of veer towards the wall, or they drive off the end into the sandbox. And I guess I was always really, really worried that maybe I wasn't strong enough to be able to steer them. And I think that fear came from having to tow my dad's back down the return road all the time. Is so hard to steer. And then being enclosed, and I kind of had this like a fire, and I was going to be trapped, and I wouldn't know how to get out. So I think that the fear that I had before getting into the car was worse than actually driving it. Like, by the time I finally sat in the car and I made my first half track down the racetrack, I kind of laughed at myself, like, oh my god, why did I build it up to be this big, scary thing, when really it's not that different from driving any other car. Like, yes, the engine is in front of you, but you tune it out. Like, your eyes just have this funny way of not noticing that it's there, and you almost look past it. And yeah, the wheelbase is shorter, and maybe they don't go straight all the time, but I mean, don't forget, you're only in the car for a couple of seconds at a time. It's almost like everything happens before you even have a chance to process it. So I would say that overall, a lot less scary than I thought it was, and probably a lot less scary than other people made it out to be, too. And I think we have a bit of a tough guy mentality, but in reality, I think that with the right training, anybody could probably master it. Maybe not master it, but anybody could try.
So when they lowered the chassis down on you, it didn't bother you at all?
No, that's okay. I'm not gonna say that it didn't bother me. It did. It still does to a certain extent. I get a little bit claustrophobic in the car. Like, by the time you have your 20-layer fire suit on and the drive shaft is between your legs and the transmission, so you don't have a lot of wiggle room in the cars, it can get really claustrophobic. I mean, the good news is that Edmonton, 80 degrees Fahrenheit is a hot day, so at least we're not kind of sweltering in the heat like you might be if we were racing in the States.
Right. So far, since you've been driving the Aka funny car, what's been the quickest CT you've had with this funny car?
So far, my quickest has been 6.92.
Nice. What track was this on?
That was in Edmonton.
So,
which is pretty cool. Edmonton has a really high altitude, so if we were to bring it down to a track that's at sea level, like Mission, BC, or maybe Seattle or something like that, I think that thing will just fly.
So how many tracks have you raced on with the funny car?
Let's see, I've raced in Mission, Edmonton, Medicine Hat, Saskatoon, Rimbey. I might be missing one. I think I've raced at probably 5 or 6. Oh, I raced in Montana as well. So yeah, maybe 6 or 7 tracks.
Okay, so how many events did you do this year?
This year we did 6.
And how'd you do this year?
We had our ups and downs. So we've, over the last couple of years, I would say since building the funny car, we've struggled on and off with our Chevy engine. Just, it was like one thing after another. We'd put it together, it would run fine for a couple of races, and then bang, it would just blow up. So we kind of midway through the season this year, we had a pretty major blowout with the Chevy, and kind of decided for the time being that enough was enough. And rather than putting it together, we ended up buying an engine off of a drag racer who was retiring, and took over her Hemi engine. So we kind of did some modifications and made it our own, and have been tuning that engine. And so far, it is going really, really well. Like, that thing has so much power that, we're running it incredibly, incredibly detuned to start. And one of our first pulls out of the gate around a 704, which is awesome. I mean, we're looking at a 7.0 index. So I guess as far as how did the season go, it definitely started off pretty painful, and it was very expensive kind of at that halfway mark when we had to rebuild our engine. But I'm so excited for the next year. Like, this new setup that we have is going to be so killer, and I know that car is just going to fly. We really want to break 200 miles per hour.
Now, did you come up with the Girl Trouble Racing name?
Nope, I inherited it. Girl Trouble Racing was the name of one of my dad's old door slammers. If just for a little context, my family, there's 4 of us girls. I have 3 older sisters, and no boys in the family other than my dad.
Yeah.
Girl Trouble, kind of a head nodded to this family of girls that he has, and eventually when he moved into his funny car, he named it the Prospector, which was an homage to a car that my grandpa used to have. There was a 57 Chevy named the Prospector. So he moved into this Prospector class, and that kind of freed up the Girl Trouble name. So he put it on my sister's junior dragster, and the name's kind of stuck with us ever since. So it's now the name that I've inherited for my car, and I still think that it plays a really nice nod to me and my sisters, because not only to him, but I'm sure to a lot of people, we really are a handful of trouble.
All right. So now, when you take the funny car out, who are all your crew members?
So for my car to run at full capacity, we usually have 3 crew people. The car chief on my team is Natasha Churchak. She's awesome, and I will say that it is really cool having another woman on the team, especially for her to now know how to tune a Chevy engine and how to tune a Hemi. I don't think that there's very many 26-year-old female crew chiefs, let alone one that knows 2 different engine styles. So she's awesome. We get along great. She's a former junior dragster driver herself. She did juniors with me growing up, and she had a bracket dragster as well. And eventually she kind of got away from it a little bit, just while she's regrouping and, figuring out her personal finances. Obviously, being a 25-year-old and having your own team is pretty lofty goal for a lot of people. So I was lucky enough to scoop her up in the interim, and she's been on my team now for 3 years. And I suspect that she'll leave eventually once she does get her own car, but for now it's been awesome having her. And so that's Natasha, and she does most of our engine and drivetrain type work. And then my fiance, Lyndon, he's our clutch guy. He does clutch and kind of assists with all of our, little odds and ends, does parachutes with me and what have you. And right now we have another vacancy on our team. We're kind of actively looking for a new person who's, transmission, those types of things. So that would kind of make up our full roster. And I do all the little odds and ends. I'm kind of that extra set of hands for whoever might be falling behind in between rounds. But, between shaking hands and kissing babies, my crew often finds me to be a little bit useless anyways.
Now, do you have any sponsors for your car?
Yeah, I do. I've been really lucky for the last 2 years. I've been really fortunate to be sponsored by Champion Auto Parts. They put on a big contest every year called Search for a Champion, and it's kind of a fan-based, voter-based system where you share on social media and you get votes and get selected for this sponsorship. So I've been lucky to have their support for the last 2 years. I'm also sponsored by 2 local oil and energy companies, Canuck Fluid Systems and Coulter Energy. They're both Alberta-based with a little bit of work in BC as well, so it's really nice to have that local support. And both myself and the prospector, my dad and I have been sponsored for, and they come out and they supply all of our fluids for the cars and keep them running like a smooth machine. And 2 years ago, we also got brand new paint put on my car, courtesy of Endura Paint, and with really nice hand lettering and detailing done by a local fellow here in Edmonton called Mad Matt.
All right, now, besides your dad being a big inspiration to you, are there any drag racers out there that inspire you?
Yeah, there's a tons. I mean, obviously, I love the legacy that people like Charlie Muldowney and Bunny Burkett, they left behind. I mean, as far as true nostalgia drag racing and paving a way for women, I mean, that's them. But at the same time, like they were before my time. I was born in the 90s. I didn't really grow up with those ladies. So the women that I've grown up idolizing are like Ashley Force and now Courtney and Brittany. I follow them both on Instagram and on Facebook, and I'm always kind of keeping up to date with their races. And same with Leah Pritchett. I just love these three women, and even Erica Enders too, are racing in in the pro leagues. But kind of like looking more locally at the nostalgia drag racing stream, Mindy Fry has been doing incredible with her Top Fuel dragster. Like, she is killer, and I had a chance to meet her last year at in Bakersfield at the California Hot Rod Reunion, and she was so friendly. She kept calling me sweetie, and I'm like, man, to be a successful racer, but also to be so humble and down to earth, like that's just goals. And I kind of watch a couple of the other girls too and see how they're doing. And one of my fellow champion teammates is based out of the U.S. Her name's Carly Jo Ellingson, and she races a door car. But we've become friends by having the same sponsorship, and we always communicate, and we're both getting married this summer, so I feel like we're at a very similar stage of life. So it's just kind of cool to be able to pull inspiration from all these different women, both from then and now, who are all doing really incredible things in their respective classes.
Now, do you know who Ashley Sanford is?
Yeah, I do. She's been like a rising star lately. Like, I can't. Didn't you win her regional championship over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I believe so.
Mhm. Yep, she's somebody that I would like to follow as well.
Yeah, I've had her on. I think 3 times she's been on the show already. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, you probably get to meet some really cool people.
Oh yeah. Then it all becomes just one big drag racing family, you know.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. Like, I have friends. Some of my best racing friends are people that I've never met in person. They're just people that I communicate with online, and we have a fellow drive, and sometimes we have the same struggles. Like, I have one fellow that is based in the eastern United States, and I'm in western Canada, and sometimes we compare notes on sponsorships and the best tactics towards attracting sponsors and how to market our teams differently. And we'll catch up. Like last year at Christmas time, he posted on Instagram that he got a motorsports marketing book for Christmas. So I messaged him, and I got the name of the author, and I ordered it on Amazon, and we kind of read through it chapter by chapter and compared notes. Now, I will say that I haven't necessarily applied every lesson that I've learned so far. I mean, I definitely do everything I can to promote the sponsors that I have, but if there's any listeners out there, we're definitely still doing our sponsorship drive for 2019.
Now, you get a lot of advice from other drivers out there?
Yeah, I think that it's like anything. People become experts in their field, or they feel that they are, and they're excited to impart wisdom on a young person. So, with all advice, you almost have to take it with a grain of salt, because sometimes you hear one thing from somebody and you hear something completely different from somebody else. And especially when it really pertains to tuning a car and how you drive it, every car is different and every setup is different. So in that sense, I always kind of trust my dad's advice the most. And we have a couple of racing families that we've grown up with where we kind of hold what they say true and near to the heart. But I would say that if anyone's willing to share advice, it's definitely good to listen, but, maybe cross-reference and check your sources before you just kind of go wildly applying everything that you've heard.
Now, can you tell us what goes into preparation to get the funny car ready for a weekend of drag racing for you?
Well, kind of thinking about our off season, we finished racing at the end of August. It's kind of when our season usually ends in August or September, depending on our weather every year. And immediately we kind of had a big crew meeting and set our goals and priorities for the year. tore everything apart, like every single nut, bolt, everything came out, rods, pistons, until we basically just had a bare block. And then, we evaluate everything, and if anything is damaged, it either we repair it ourselves, or if it's a specialty item, we might have to send it away to get repaired. Everything has to go across the border that needs to get recertified by SFI, so that takes a long time to kind of ship off and get back. This year, we're kind of rerouting some of our electrical stuff that wasn't working the way we want it to. Our parachutes are getting pretty old, so replace the parachutes and replace the parachute cables. We're building a new cover for our fuel tank. We have to replace the tires this season. And then essentially once we start getting everything back, like once we get our bare block back, it's starting from the ground up. Like we completely do all of our assembly ourselves. So right now, like everything from like the crank to the cam, everything is out. So we need to put that back in, time it, reassemble all of our heads, reassemble our pistons, put everything back together. And that will take probably a month in and of its own right. And that's just on the cars, but there's a ton of stuff that we do that's not even related to the cars, in terms of getting our schedule set up, recruiting new crew people, attracting our sponsors. Sometimes we need to do repairs to the rig itself, like the motorhome and the trailer, keeping the shop organized. So this is just like an ongoing thing. We're going to be busy all winter, and we won't really start racing again until kind of May, June. We'll be racing full time again, but if we can, we might kind of try to head down to the U.S. and hit up one of the winter races.
So what kind of tires are you running on?
I have MT tires on my car.
All right. Now, if there's any young girls that listen to this interview and they're thinking, oh, I want to be like Courtney and drive a alcohol funny car, what kind of advice would you give them?
I would tell them to go for it. I mean, if their biggest fear is that the car is going to be too hard to drive, they're wrong. They'll be able to figure it out, especially if you put together a good machine where things are well balanced and you have your center of gravity right with the engine. Like, it's not as bad as you think. But I would say that the other piece of advice that I have is just for all racers, like, you have to think of it holistically, like maybe from the outside. For people who aren't, like, living and breathing drag racing, they may not know everything else that goes into it. And when you move from a bracket car to a Pro Series car, it's just so much more that goes into it. You need those extra hands, you need those extra crew. It's more expensive. Things break more often. They require more maintenance. It's not just, going out and driving on the weekend anymore. You might have things like more sponsorship showings to go to or interviews, things like that. So it's kind of taking it beyond even that just like weekend enthusiasts to, it really does have to become a lifestyle and a way of life. And I think that for a lot of drag racers, we're absolutely happy to do that. But I think that sometimes for the fans, like, I don't think they can sometimes even get their head around, like, how much we put in to do this, even if we're only racing 6 or 7 times a season.
Now, do you have a favorite track to run on, Courtney?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty partial to my home track here. It's a combination of things. I mean, it's so nice going out and knowing everybody there. Our track owners, they always make us feel so welcome and at home. The surface is beautiful, and there is a little something to be said about knowing where the turnoff is, every time, and being able to maneuver through the pits. But every time I go to a new track, it's really interesting to see how welcoming the other drag racers are. Like, they're kind of excited to see somebody new and something different. The fans are excited, and I always have to do my first walk down and kind of scout where the bumps might be and where the return road is and where the turnoffs are, so that you feel prepared and safe going down these new tracks. But I mean, aside from Edmonton, like, Saskatoon is always fun. They celebrated their 50th anniversary 2 years ago, so I guess they must be 52 already. And from what I've heard, the track really hasn't changed that much in the last 52 years, so it's really this historical place, like, rich with memories. And, for a nostalgia drag racer, it's pretty cool to kind of see things as they are. But I would love to race in Bakersfield. It would be pretty cool to race in Vegas. Like, I mean, 4 wide would be awesome. I don't know that nostalgia would ever do that, but I mean, it'd be cool even just to go see.
Yeah, I know your dad said he'd love to run Bakersfield too, but he said it's so far to drive.
Yeah, it's such a long haul, and even trying to crunch the numbers and figure out how much it will cost us in fuel, and putting the crew people up in a hotel and renting cars. Maybe paying for flights if someone can't take 5 or 6 days off just to drive. It becomes pretty expensive. So we will do it one day. When that happens, is always going to remain a little bit of a question mark. But I think we're going to make it happen one of these days.
Now, do you only run quarter mile or you do 8 mile racing?
We mostly do, like when we're competing, we do quarter mile, but we'll occasionally race at, we'll do some exhibition races. We'll race on airports, and those tend to be 8th mile.
All right. So where do you get all your fire safety equipment from?
I would say that what I have is a little bit of a mix. We found a really good supplier who got me a really great 20-layer fire suit, and my helmet is Impact. I think I have some Simpson gloves. It's a little bit of a hodgepodge, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, your dad was the same way. He was kind of mixed up too.
Yeah. Sometimes, so at this point, I'm not sponsored by a safety manufacturer, so it's a little bit of kind of seeing what fits best. As a woman, I will say that not all of the manufacturers have the same degree of customization. So if you want to get something that fits and actually is like made for a woman rather than a man, there's only certain suppliers that can make a really nice custom suit for a female. And have it fit comfortably. Like I made the mistake of trying to buy one off the rack, and I ordered this fire suit, and it just didn't fit. Like it didn't have hips, and the waist was so tiny, and then the jacket was huge in the shoulders and tinier on the hips, and it was so uncomfortable. So I realized that if I wanted to have something that I felt comfortable racing, and I had to go a custom route, which is obviously more expensive, but I think that until they come out with a better line of fire suits for women, it's kind of custom is the only way to go. And I know there are a few brands that have ladies' fire suits, but they tend to only be the 5-layer. So, yeah, that's probably an opportunity for the manufacturers to do a little bit better by to us chicks.
Okay, now, have you reached any milestones in your drag racing career so far?
Well, I would say that every time I've progressed from a new car, it's been a milestone for me. I won a few big races and I was proud of that, but those years, I guess, were more when I was in my bracket car. So now that I'm in the funny car, I mean, the next really big milestone that I want to hit, I would love to run 200 miles per hour or faster. Like, that's been a goal for so long, and I've gone 199. So it's so close, it's in reach. And that said, like, I like to set myself small milestones, break 200 miles per hour, go an entire weekend without breaking apart, go and run a perfect index, get a really great light. Like, those small milestones definitely make the racing more satisfying, because if I set up my goal and my only goal is like I need to come in first place at every single race, well, I mean, every racer out there is trying to do that, and unless you happen to have that perfect combination of you've built this amazing car and everything holds up exactly as you expect it to, and you get lucky every round, like, you set those extreme goals, and it can be setting up for disappointment. So I'd say that I have my small milestones, and, at the back of our head, we always want to win. We always want to be going fast, and, we'd love to take home a season championship. So maybe those are the big goals in the back of my mind, but we try to celebrate the little things along the way, too.
Okay, now, so far in your drag racing career, have you had any accidents or close accidents at all?
When I was in juniors, I actually kind of got into the most serious accidents I've been to. My dad and I were out testing my little junior, and it was kind of a couple of weeks before the season was supposed to start. So we kind of pulled it into like a parking lot of an industrial building. Nobody else was there, and he was having me just kind of do like little short whacks on the throttle to kind of test this new engine that he'd put together. And the throttle didn't stick, but I probably stayed in it for a little bit too long. And winter had just ended in Edmonton, and when it snows, we put sand down to melt the ice. So the parking lot hadn't been sanded yet, and when I hit the brakes on this little junior dragster, it just hit the sand and skid for like 100 feet. It would not stop, and I ended up putting my little junior through a chain link fence. So my dad was pretty terrified when that happened, but I guess the nice thing is that's the closest thing I could call to an accident. Nothing's ever been on the track. This year I went cone hunting for the first time, and I'm sure you know what that means.
Oh yeah.
Kind of got a little bit squirrely on the center line, and as we were kind of going back down the return road, the race was delayed. And I turned to one of my crew members and like, oh, did somebody oil down the track? Why is the race delayed? And he looked at me like I'm an idiot, and he's like, you hit the cone. They have to reset the timing. To be perfectly honest, Dave, I didn't even realize. Like, I must have just kind of clipped it with the side of my fender, but I kind of got teased a little bit, and now I'm being called the cone huntress.
Yeah, there's a Nitro funny car driver in New Mexico. His car is called the Cone Hunter.
I know. My dad made a big post making fun of me for hitting these cones, and he tagged that guy in it. Oh well, you have to be able to make fun of yourself.
Yeah. So, are you ready for the fun questions now?
Sure.
You have any hobbies outside of drag racing?
I do. I like to say that I'm extremely well-rounded. You know, usually on any given week, I play sports once a week, either with a company team or sometimes we play like two-person sports like badminton, tennis, all those types of things. I volunteer, so I'm involved with a really, really good organization, Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I have a little sister through that, and she and I spend time together once a week, and we always like to do something fun. You know, we go for ice cream, or we go to the dog park, or whatever else, and it's all about helping kind of her develop her skills and being a mentor, but at the same time, I get something great out of it because I get to hang out and get to be a kid again, so that's pretty cool. So I do that, and I kind of bought an older house about 1.5 years ago, and I spend a lot of time doing my house renovations. Right now, we're kind of halfway through the main floor and working on the basement. So those are kind of the random little things that always keep me busy. But aside from that, I mean, just kind of your average person. I like to hang out with my friends, like to go to the movies. I love food. I could eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, whether I cook it myself or go out to eat. I love eating. Is that a hobby? Can you say that eating is a hobby?
Okay, since you love eating so much, here comes your next question. What's your favorite food?
Oh my god, pizza. I know it's like the most basic food ever, but I love all pizza. Like, it can be like nice, gourmet, like Italian style thin crust pizza, or it can be like Pizza Hut. I don't care what it is. It can even be like frozen Delissio pizza. If it's somebody, I can't not have it. I just love pizza.
Now, what would be your favorite beverage of choice?
I'm a beer drinker, for sure. I love beer. We have lots of really great craft breweries in Alberta, and I'm a big fan of craft beer. Yeah, my team teases me a little bit because I'm not afraid to venture into the fruit beers. So if it has like apricot or orange or lime in it, you know, that's all the better, especially in the summer. It's great and refreshing. But I will, you know, like every year, my fiance and I would like to throw a big keg party kind of in the fall, winter, when things are getting a little bit boring in Edmonton. So, yeah, I would say that I'm a pretty big beer drinker.
What's your favorite non-alcoholic beverage to drink?
Oh, definitely Slurpees.
All right. Now, what's your favorite color?
My favorite color, yellow.
Okay. What was your favorite TV show growing up as a kid?
Favorite TV show as a child and favorite TV show now is still the same answer. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, I grew up as this like kid in the '90s watching Sarah Michelle Gellar, and she's just like such the epitome of girl power. I love her. So yeah, I still binge watch Buffy. Like if I have kind of one of those rare opportunities where I have nothing to do and just want to kill time, I can pull up like any episode from the 7 seasons and pick up exactly where I've left off. I know all of the characters. It's it's pretty fun.
Now, did you have a favorite cartoon when you were young?
Not really, to be honest. I think because I'm the youngest, I wasn't really ever allowed control of the remote. So I would usually be watching what my older sisters were watching, so I kind of had to skip through the cartoon phase. I feel like when other kids were watching Barney, I was watching horror movies with my older sisters.
All right. Now, throughout your drag racing career so far, have you won any trophies or?
No, not really. I love traveling, and I almost don't like going to the same place twice. I have a cottage, and kind of going there feels a little bit like my second home. But yeah, I would love to kind of see the whole world if I could.
Now, are you a dog person or a cat person?
Honestly, I'm a cat person. I have a cat. She's a handful. I would say that like I somehow drew the short end of the stick and have one of the worst cats in the world, and I still love her. So that has to mean that I'm a cat person.
All right. Now, what's your favorite music?
Mm. I'm usually more into pop music. I like music that I can sing along to. So when I know all of the lyrics and it comes on the radio, I don't really care what era it's from. You know, my favorite stations are ones that usually kind of combine new popular music with some of the stuff from 70s, 80s, 90s. But yeah, usually like the random mix of songs that you would expect to play at a wedding. That's the kind of stuff that I would like to listen to all the time.
All right. Now, can you think of one most embarrassing moment you had on the racetrack?
Most embarrassing moment on the racetrack. Like, to be honest, I mean, my early life in racing was pretty embarrassing all around. Like, you know, car culture, most people out of the racetrack, that's what they talk about. They talk about their rides, and people come over and they ask you pretty, you know, from some pretty basic questions to some extremely specific ones. And I think for a long time, I really had no idea what I was talking about. And, you know, especially like when I had my junior or my dragster, like if something went wrong, you know, like a fellow racer would come over and be like, hey, like, so what happened with your car? And I'd be like, but I kind of like side eye and like look at my dad and expect him to answer the question because I didn't understand the cars. So I don't know if that's embarrassing or if it's just ignorance, but it made it a big goal of mine that when I did start racing the funny car, I didn't want to just be the driver. You know, I didn't want situations to come up where a fan asked me, like, what kind of supercharger I had and kind of, like, bat my eyelashes and be like, what's a supercharger? I got my license. That was really cool. And then I guess kind of... What was the question? What are some of my proudest moments of racing, or most of my the ones I look back on most fondly? I guess like the third tie would be this last summer when I got called up to do a pre-race ceremony and did a little speech on the starting line. We had probably about 5 or 6 or 7,000 fans there that day. And then suddenly out of nowhere, my boyfriend at the time, Lyndon, kind of walks out onto the starting line and dropped down onto one knee. So that was obviously really special to get engaged at the racetrack and in front of our fans, which, can't really think of a more suiting place. And it's really cool because Lyndon wasn't a drag racer prior to us dating. He got involved in the sport because I love it so much. So for him to kind of fully embrace it and to join the crew and, to pick that place of all places to kind of like a really private, intimate moment, but be willing to share it at a place that I love, that's obviously really special to me as well.
All right. Now, if people listening want to find out your schedule for next year, what's the best way for them to find the racing schedule?
Yeah, so we don't have every X marked on the calendar just yet. We're waiting to hear back from some of our local tracks on when we're going to have our major events. So I would say the best way to do it is to keep your eye on our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Girl Trouble, so really easy to find. And as our event schedule gets finalized, we're going to post it through like Facebook events. So that'll be a good way to do it, but while you're at it, if you want to follow us on Instagram as well, it's Girl Trouble FC. So that's Girl Trouble Funny Car, but for short, Girl Trouble FC. And I'm always posting like pictures of the car and pictures of the team and kind of keeping up to date with what we do in the off season. So for those who are kind of curious about what it looks like, I like to post things on our stories and in our feeds as well. Like Instagram is definitely the new age for social media, so that's where we're on most often.
Sounds good. Well, Courtney, I want to thank you very much for your time for the interview tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really nice chatting with you. I hope you learned some cool things and that people were entertained, but really appreciate you supporting the sport and caring about us folks north of the border too.
And if people that are listening right now want to hear Courtney and her dad some more, you could tune in to Rockin' and Racing tonight with Joe Wall and Chris Seward on Radio Buzz D. What time are you going to be on there?
I think that my dad is going live in just a couple of minutes, around 15 minutes or so. What does that make it, 9:30 Central Time? And for myself, I'm actually going to be on his show in 2 weeks. I'm going to go on the November 28th.
Ah, okay. Well, stay tuned in 2 weeks to hear Courtney on Rockin' and Racing and listen to her dad tonight, everybody, if you're not busy. And thanks again for your time, Courtney.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. It was nice chatting with you.
You have a good night.
You too, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.